And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your sensei, Bob. So, how many of you have had awkward? You know? And what do they cause? Hmm? Do, 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 do. So, see that? That was pretty much me, and still is. A little more of this. Um, that right there is what I kind of look like as a kid. Let's see if I can find. Uh, I'm just waiting for somebody to show up. So here we are, 1 minute and 11 seconds. And remember, don't believe a word I say. Right? So this show is going to go as long as my battery lasts. I have about 90%. So that's about an hour and a half. If I get a audience, I might come back on. Right? Uh, let's see. Where's the one with my childhood self on it? Mhm. Mm-mm. Mhm. Boy, I've done a lot of shows, man. A lot of shows. I don't know where that one went. Oh. Uh, hmm. Guess I didn't have that as my opening shot. Anyway, so awkward moments. Anybody there got some stories of awkward moments? This is a live chat. We're supposed to share things. Let's see. Now, pretty much any one of these moments.
Hi. Hey. Hi. Well, I look pretty good considering I weigh a bunch, because I look really good. 240 pounds. What the heck? Just weigh 240. I look like in shape and really good.
But how do you feel about yourself? Right? That's a question. I don't even have that picture of me as a little kid, but like I said, pretty much look just like I did back then. You know, and I pretty much feel the same. When I was a little kid, I was the youngest. I was a miracle child. My mom had me when she was 50, and in 1950, you know, she might have been 48, somewhere there, but almost 50. A lot older than most people are when they have a kid, but they were Catholic, so they snooping all the time, and that's what happens. That's how you get six kids, right? And my parents should have never been parents. I mean, they weren't evil, terrible people, but they were their personalities and characteristics, just like most people, were. Is it what you're born with or what you grow up in? And both my parents, had traumas pretty much their whole life, and their traumas weren't as bad as, like, let's say, some kid who's growing up in the Gaza Strip right now and has lost his whole family, and he's got no legs and can't see. Yet he just survived that bomb that was dropped by an F-16 that said "Made in America," so, or those kids in the middle, in the high L. That's what that middle strip of Africa is, and Sudan is part of that, and they actually are having a worse time than, because there are 4 million kids in Sudan and Sierra Leone and Ethiopia and that whole strip there. And any place in Africa that has resources like gold and iridium and titanium and diamonds and oil and gas and rare earth elements, they have war. They have civil war. Every place in Africa that has nothing except land and sheep and crops and people, they have peace, right? They may be poor, but they're eating and no one's killing them. So you can either be, my gym teacher said this about me when I was 5, or you can just, like there's a really interesting dynamic about human beings. Either you're really torn up by that experience, or you become a person who can go with the flow, right? Like my dad. And when I came back into my family, I was still little. I was about 4'5", and people didn't even see me. They would trip over me. I'm right there, bang. They fall. "Oh, who are you? Get out of my way!" And my father said that more than once. Who are you? You don't belong here. I don't know who you are. Because I grew up with my grandma until I was 7. Right? And I was there with my folks for about 8 months, and then a nun murdered me, and crushed my esophagus, right, so I could barely breathe, broke my jaw, broke the little stirrup in this ear so I couldn't see, crushed the orbit of my eye, I crushed the orbit of my eye so I couldn't see, and broke the little stirrup in my ear so I couldn't hear, and basically my brain, my little skull cap was still soft, so she couldn't see the. These scars here are from my younger sister who tried to murder me with a um, metal Easter bunny. She picked it up. It had a little wheelbarrow that you had chocolates in, and she picked it up. I mean, it wasn't a toy. It was like a Easter decoration, and she took it off the table, and it had these big metal ears, and she tried to poke my eyes out with it. Right. So you could, you know. So basically, the nun murdering me in first grade was a blessing from God because I ended up in this really terrible hospital, Catholic hospital, and my mom kind of got the hint. So she and my Aunt Gracie and Dr. Black got me out of there, along with Cardinal Cushing. And so for 2.5 years, I was in the most best Cardinal Cushing put me in his own private hospital because when you're cardinal, if you pass away from the Pope, you get to get a good life, and that's why people go into the church. And that's when it was decided that I was going to be a rocket scientist for the church, right, for the Pope. And so I was, once I got well enough, once they took the cast, I mean, man, I had this cast that went from the top of my head to my shoulder blades. And, you know, I looked like a 1950s sci-fi creature. And my eye was like, ooh, and people couldn't even look at it. Right. So, oh, I was sent off to this, not a seminary, but a sanctuary, a Maryknoll sanctuary. Had about 140 members, half men, half women, and they all wore civvies, and instead of the penguin suit, and they were all geniuses, unbelievable scholars in their own discipline. And so I had audiographers and speech therapists and people who were can make you see again. Like we're really well, PhDs, doctors, and for 18 months I was with them. They taught me Latin and Greek, Hebrew, at least how to read it. Meaning that was one of the things my optical guy said. You can read Hebrew, you'll be able to see anything. So when I came back, my parents had moved from where they had lived, right? And everyone was going to public school except my older sister. She was still going to the nunnery, and that was so much freedom. I mean, public school, whoa! And so when I got there, they had moved into this nice house way out in the not even suburbs. It was still rural area. Now it's high end suburbs. It's near a place called Oldfield, right? And the closest city was Glen Cove and Oyster Bay. And like that's kind of where what's his name in the city of Oyster Bay, Long Island, a young man, Billy Joel, right? That guy. So we were about 25, 30 miles further um, east um, of there, right? And we were about another 15 miles east of Glen Cove, and we were south. We were almost in the middle, kind of very close to where the Long Island Expressway ends in Islip, right? And so, but it was a big farming because there were more potatoes grown in Long Island than in Idaho, right? So anyway, and out there were these big farms that were owned by Dutch families for 300 years, and there were these big estates that were owned by the rich Dutch folk, like the Andersons, and they owned large corporations. Their families did, and knew how to hold on to the cash. Right? I mean, there were these other folks that were called robber barons, and that's what my mother's family were, like 5 generations ago, and they were really rich because they stole all of like New York, right? North, up north, above Westchester, they took, right? And so anyway, I was a product of all of that. But I had this, you know, by growing up in Harlem with my grandma, surrounded by people who were of amazing character. Meaning, Harlem had no police. They didn't need them because on the east side were all these immigrants, from Europe. Right, every 2 blocks a different location. Greek and German and Lithuanian and Polish. There were about the 10 different types of Polish people, and the 10 different types of Ukrainian people, and the 10 different types of Russian people. And that was every 2 blocks. So for 100 blocks, that's why they put the United Nations over there on Second Avenue. Right. So from about the United Nations, north is, about 78th Street is kind of where Harlem, or maybe 92nd Street, somewhere around there, between 78th and 92nd is where Harlem started. East Side, all European um, you know, people who immigrants, right? Center, black, right, all the way up, right, all the way up Broadway, black, right, and it was, the crossroad was not Martin Luther, Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, right, at the time the most powerful black politician in Congress, and on the west side was the Caribbean folk and Spanish folk, because the Spanish conquered the Caribbean and South America and Central America, right? So everybody who came from those necks of the woods were called Caribbean, and pretty much all through history, the most uncriminal people in America are the immigrants, because they're all they wanted to do is get out of wherever they were because it was so bad, into America, where if you could be invisible, the whiter you were, the more invisible you were, you could get along to go along to get along, right? But every so often there'd be a cringeworthy moment where, oops, the jig is up, right? So I was with all these people who were doing the best. So when you hear Donnie go on about, and they're criminals and rapists and mentally, no, the immigrants are coming here are the greatest um, American citizens there are, and we need them. You hear all over America, nobody wants to work because we have cut the immigrants, right? And so we have a real interesting um, thing placed in front of us. You have JoJo, the used car salesman, and he's doing all this stuff like trying to lower college kids, get rid of their debt, because if I know people who were in school in the '80s and they're still paying. They're paying off. They haven't even paid off the principal. They're still paying off the the, the what it's cost to borrow that money, right? The Vic. And so, um, because of how I grew up, right? So I lived right on Fifth Avenue, right at the most northern part of Central Park is where my grandma had her brownstone, right? And I always thought brownstones were called brownstones because brown people lived in them. No, those were those were really nice houses. Those were houses that were built by J.P. Morgan, um, so his middle management could live there and could get to work quickly, right? And that's why they put in the Fifth Avenue and trolley, so all the middle management could get downtown quickly. And then and back then they had elevated subways that were like steam driven, right? And once they had the electric trolley, they dug up Fifth Avenue, Seventh Avenue, Eighth Avenue, Second Avenue, uh, the Lexington Avenue, and what they did was they just dug a big pit, put steel there. This after the Civil War, they put steel there and then covered it up. Right? They didn't make a tunnel; they just made a trench and and lowered the tracks that were elevated because they didn't need to elevate it, because they elevated it because they had steam engines pulling those subways, right? And they weren't subways, moving workers. Because up until 2005-ish, 10-ish, 2008, let's right in the middle. 2008, New York City was still a manufacturing town. That was its. Now it's not. Now it's a place where rich people live and bankers are, and it's like Las Vegas. Wall Street is the biggest gambling casino there is. So all of the stuff that I've just spoken to, um, in the last 20 minutes, it's cringeworthy. Let's see what this works. Yes, and question mark 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 mark. Boom 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 boom. See, it works. You can send ask a question, because this show tell us your own story, and I comment to it, and then the rest of the cadre does. There's two of you now, so when more than two come together, in Jesus' name, there he is. So Jesus is here too. So um, everything you think really sucks, right? So there is no difference between JoJo and Donald Trump. The only difference is Donnie is so narcissistic and has the attention span of a gnat. I mean, if you really look at things like I do very closely and listen to it very clearly, because this ear, even though I'm deaf in it, I hear other frequencies. See, that's what the audiologist, he kind of checked it all out and says, you got a pretty interesting ear there. No longer does it work like the other one does, but you can hear things far, far away. You can hear certain frequencies like low ELF frequencies, and most people don't even know there. You can hear things that dog hear. So that's why dogs really like me, because when they go, huh, I'm going, huh. And so why so I get out of the sanctuary and I'm a new guy. I am like, I feel no awkwardness at all. That my head looks like a pin, and I mean like a bowling pin, right? It's shaped because it got squished. It's still almost. What do you think? Bowling. I mean, that's if my beard wasn't here. I mean, well, look at that. See, that's this is the top of the pin, and this is the. Anyway, none of my physical attributes. I never thought about them. I never had a mirror. I don't have a mirror. I can't see. I have to like. Anyway, I've never been, compromised by how I feel about myself, you know, because I've always had this connection with God's love. Because man, I have survived so much stuff that most people would be dead by now, right? And I constantly am given the insight that okay, don't worry about it. I got it covered, right? Just keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about people, listening to what you say. Don't worry about no one's buying your novels or even looking at them. Don't worry about any of this. Just keep telling the story. That's why I'm a griot. I just tell the story. Many people get very annoyed at it. Look at John. He gets annoyed when I tell the story because it brings out in him, and this is what a griot does. He tells a story that brings out emotions within the listener that the listener no longer can ignore. They're things that make them cringe about themselves. No longer can they, you know, look at John. Everything he does on his show is so to show you that, how he's not awkward. But why would he be doing that if he was? Anyway, you get the picture, right? So, now 23 minutes and 23 seconds. So there's two of you guys there. So come on, somebody say something. Let's have some intercourse here. So, I've lived all around the world. The United States is the only place that is so screwed up about sex, right? And if we were to take the word, let's say, chocolate, and interpose sex into it. So, what do you think about chocolate? So, why don't you tell us about chocolate, audience? So what do I think about chocolate? Chocolate is something that I do with the opposite chocolate, right? Now, some people like the same chocolate they are, and so that's fine. They love eating themselves. If they could get their head down there, they would, but they can't. So they eat a similar chocolate as themselves, right? Other people love, some people really like dark chocolate and they're light chocolate. Some people love milk chocolate and they're butterfat chocolate. So my thing is I love all chocolate, right? Um, but I don't eat all chocolate, right? So certain chocolates, hey, I can get down, right? Other chocolates I love interacting with, right? Talking to and getting how that chocolate feels. And my whole thing, it's not about me. I tell these stories. These stories aren't about me. It's about the we. You know, what caused that circumstance? What caused that situation? It's about the we in me. And that has always been my life, right? and why we are in the predicament we're in. It's not a new one. All our leaders have been this because you can't, especially in the United States, but all across the world, everyone who's in politics, look at Canada, look at France, look at Germany, look at Russia, look at China. I mean, none of those people, or look at Israel and the Strip. Those people are the same people, and they're killing each other, right? It's like unfreaking believable. So, if you ever, so my family, my mother and father were married almost 80 years. They truly loved each other, but they couldn't stand each other, right? And my father, because of him being in the military and also him being when he was a young man, when he was a child, an adolescent, and a young man, he was considered worse. Well, there'd be signs saying no blacks, no dogs, no Italians, you know. So um, he had that. Um, Now I'm of my brothers and sisters. They all look Italian. They all have dark curly hair. Me, I had blonde, brown hair and blue eyes, super white skin, right? And I never thought of any what I was, right? What was that? Something just was on my tummy. I don't know what it was. But let's see. Come on, guys, say something. Ugh. I'm gonna put this over here.